You're sitting at someone else's Thanksgiving table, maybe a friend's, maybe a partner's, and their family is loud and messy and bickering over something stupid. And you're watching it all thinking, I no longer have this. It's not as if you didn't get an invitation. It was your choice. And somewhere between the stuffing and the awkward small talk, someone looks at you and goes, "So where's your family?" And you smile and say something vague because the real answer takes too long to explain away simply. Most people don't actually want to hear it, since it's quite awkward. They prefer you to say, "Oh, they couldn't make it," so everyone can move on. But you're still sitting with it. The weight of a choice that other people will never fully grasp, a choice that society has decided is probably your fault somehow, without getting the full story. What's often misunderstood is the people who cut off their families are not the ones who gave up easily. They're almost always the ones who tried the longest. Arrangement. It's one of those words that sounds clinical and cold, but the reality of it is anything but. The birthdays you don't acknowledge. It's seeing someone who looks like your mother in a grocery store and feeling your chest cave in for a second. Explaining to your kids why they don't see their grandparents on one side. It's defending a decision you've already made 1,000 times inside your own head to someone who just met you. Thing is, we live in a world that worships family unconditionally. Almost religiously. Blood is thicker than water. We build entire cultures around the idea that family love is the purest kind. So when someone steps away from it, the assumption is they must be selfish or ungrateful. But what if the story is the other way around? Think about someone, maybe it's even you, who spent their entire 20s driving 3 hours every holiday to sit at a table where they felt completely invisible. Not unloved, but unseen. Where every conversation eventually circled back to what they hadn't done yet, who they hadn't become, why they still weren't quite enough. Yet, they kept going back every year, because that's what you do. Leaving felt like betrayal, and hope is a hard thing to fully let go of, especially when it's pointed at the people who raised you. And then one year, they finally just didn't go, and the world didn't end. But the grief that followed, that did feel like an ending. Dr. Carl Pilmer at Cornell spent years studying family estrangement, and what he found goes against almost everything we naturally assume. He discovered repeatedly that people who cut off a parent or sibling say it wasn't this one big moment. It was a long, slow falling apart after years of trying, years of hoping, conversations that went nowhere, apologies that never came, the same behavior repeating over and over. And then one day it just didn't make sense to keep trying. The cost of staying became higher than the cost of leaving. I wouldn't class that as giving up. It's someone who's cared enough, thought it through, and finally chose themselves. Something to think about. When people cut off family, it's rarely easy. They mourn it, not just once, but over and over. They mourn the parent they needed but didn't get. The bond that could have been there with a brother or sister. The version of family that looked normal everywhere else, just not in their own home. That grief, it doesn't go away just because the relationship did. And yet, the part often misunderstood, many of them describe something they didn't expect. For the first time in their adult life, things felt quiet, like the noise had finally stopped, and they could actually hear their own thoughts. It might sound like indifference, but it's not. That's what relief feels like when you've been carrying something heavy for so long that you forgot you were even carrying it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to explain to someone why a certain relationship drains you, and they just don't get it? Since from the outside, nothing looks wrong. There's no bruises or obvious crime scene. Of course, a quiet, steady feeling that you are never quite enough. Love in this family comes with conditions. You're always somehow failing. That your needs are an inconvenience. Who you are, the real version of you, is not welcome here. Researchers call it emotional invalidation, and the pattern it creates runs deep. When the people who were supposed to make you feel safe consistently dismiss what you felt, it changes how you see yourself to the point it changes how safe you think it is to need anything from anyone. It's slow, like the drip, drip, drip of a ceiling leak that eventually takes out the whole floor. So people don't walk away from families because something exploded. It tends to be because something eroded over time. The cruelest part is, even when you know the relationship was hurting you, it sometimes still feels like you're the bad guy. That voice in your head, wondering if you should have tried harder, forgiven faster, or needed less. That guilt, it's not proof that you made the wrong choice. Instead, it demonstrates that you actually cared. You had love in you, and it just didn't have a safe place to land. People who don't care don't feel that guilt. They just leave without looking back or second-guessing. No sitting at a stranger's Thanksgiving table wondering if you'd done the right thing. The guilt is a very human response. And then there's some people who reach a point where they just don't feel it anymore. No guilt or grief. And that makes sense, too. You can only knock on one door so many times before your hand stops reaching for it, right? What I want you to take from this, whether you've done this or someone did this to you, perhaps you're somewhere in the middle still figuring it out. Cutting off family is not the easy way out since there is no easy way out. It's choosing one kind of pain over another. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes it is genuinely the most caring thing a person can do for themselves. And honestly, sometimes even for the people they're walking away from. Because a relationship built on resentment and obligation and performance isn't love. It's a deal. And some deals need to end before both people can actually move forward. There are people watching this right now who have spent years making themselves smaller to fit inside a family that was too small for who they actually are. And they've been told that's loyalty. That's love. That staying is the right thing to do. But surviving isn't noble. It's just surviving. You are allowed to want more than that. The people who cut off their families aren't cold or dramatic. They're people who loved, sometimes deeply, sometimes desperately, and eventually had to choose between that love and themselves. And they chose themselves. And that is one of the hardest, most quietly devastating things a person can do. If any part of this landed for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're somewhere in this story right now, still figuring it out, you're not alone. Not even close. If this genuinely resonated, not just intellectually, but in that quieter place where you actually recognize yourself, then you're probably someone who thinks deeply about this stuff, which means you'll find a lot more value with my other psychology simplified videos on the screen now. Subscribe if you haven't already and hit the join button if you want to help keep these psychology deep dives going. Subscribe my channel and press the bell icon.